There are only two seasons in Toronto, winter and construction, and unfortunately for us, winter is over. So we're just gonna have to deal with whatever background noises the camera is gonna pick up. Anyway, we aren't here to talk about construction, we are here to talk about books. That's right, today I'm not talking about makeup or skincare or anti-consumerism, I'm talking about Asian books. So right now, during the month of May, the YouTuber Read with Cindy is hosting the Asian Readathon. If you've never seen a Read with Cindy video before, you don't even have to like books in order to be thoroughly entertained by Read with Cindy's channel. As a fellow depressed bitch, I relate to her so hard, and she's honestly one of the funniest, not just booktubers, but honestly just people, point blank period, on this platform. Her rant reviews, chef's kiss. So good. Last year, Cindy, who's Vietnamese American, came up with the Asian Readathon to try and get people to read more Asian literature. This year, there are 5 distinct prompts / challenges, and since we are all stuck in lockdown and I have so much time to kill, I've decided I'm going to participate. This video is just going to be outlining the books that I'm planning on reading to fulfill each challenge. I'll be uploading a wrap-up with my thoughts on the books at the end of the month. If any of you guys want to follow along, maybe read some of the books that I'm reading, or even just try and do this challenge with the books that are already accessible to you given your situation, that would be pretty cool. So, without any further ado, let's get it. Hi, Editing Prachi here to interrupt the video to say that I am acutely aware of how annoying it must be for you guys to see me continually fidgeting with my bangs because I'm the one editing this video and I myself am getting annoyed. But you know what's even more annoying? Actually having those dumb bangs on my stupid forehead. So I'm sorry. I'm sorry that it's going to be really annoying for you guys. I'm sorry to myself for having thought that cutting off my bangs because I was going crazy in quarantine was a good idea. And lastly, I'm very sorry to my hair for having done this to it. I lost this round, folks. In the ongoing war between my bangs and myself, the bangs won this one.
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Anyway, that's everything from editing me, and now back to your regularly scheduled programming. Alright, so the first challenge is to just read any book by an Asian author. The book I picked up off of my shelves to fulfill this challenge is Norwegian Wood by Japanese author Haruki Murakami. I don't speak any Japanese, so I'm gonna go really Anglo with the names here. I'm not even gonna roll the R. This book was published in 1987, but it's set in the 1960s. It's the coming-of-age story of Toru, a young guy in college in Tokyo who's in love with a girl called Naoko. So on the one hand, there are definitely themes of romance and first love, but on the other hand, there's this layer of tragedy overlying the whole thing, because Naoko and Toru are not just united by their possible budding romance, but by the fact that one of their very close mutual friends died quite suddenly. And so the book is also about how this person's death and grief and loss marks them both. I actually read this book when I was a teenager, almost a decade ago. I have no idea what happens in it. I only remember that I liked it. So I'm excited to give this a proper reread, refresh my memory, see if I still like it. By the way, one of the twists that Cindy has set for this readathon is that every distinct book that you pick must be from a different ethnic group. So each of the books that I will be reading to fulfill this challenge is going to be coming from a different country. The second challenge is to read a book featuring an Asian character that you can relate to, or a book which is written by an Asian author that you can relate to. So if you're an immigrant, maybe you can read a book about an immigrant character. If you're a woman, maybe you can read a book by a female author. The book that I've chosen to fulfill this challenge is The Windfall by Indian author Diksha Basu. This novel came out in 2017 and I don't actually own a physical copy of it. So this is a book I'll actually be reading digitally. It's been made accessible to me by my public library on an app on my phone. The author and I are both Indian women, so that's how I'm relating to her. The novel centers around the Jha family that live in Delhi. They're constantly trying to move up in social class when the father suddenly comes into a whole bunch of money, a windfall. So the Jha family uses this newfound money to move to a very, very rich, snobbish, upper class part of Delhi. And the novel is essentially about how they deal with that. It's a much lighter read than a lot of the other things I've picked. It's supposedly a comedy of errors, but I discovered this novel by actually reading one of those lists that went, if you really like the movie Parasite, you should read these books next. And this was one of the books on there. So I feel like in addition to the comedy, there's probably going to be some pretty interesting commentary on social class. I'm not very excited about having to read on my phone, but the plot and premise of The Windfall is engaging enough that I will endure it. The third challenge is to read a book featuring an Asian character or written by an Asian author who is different from you. So if you're straight, you can read about a queer character. If you're Vietnamese, you can read about a Japanese character. To fulfill this challenge, I picked up off of my shelves the book Human Acts by Korean author Kang. The book came out in 2016. It was originally written in Korean, so this is a translation. And although it's a fiction, it's a novel, it's based around a very real historical event that happened in Korea, the 1980 Gwangju Uprising. The South Korean city of Gwangju is one of the most progressive and left-leaning cities in South Korea. And in 1980, a whole bunch of university students in the city of Gwangju held what started out as a peaceful protest against the dictator of South Korea at the time. Things got very quickly out of hand as the police and eventually even the South Korean military got involved, and in the end, what started out as a peaceful protest led to the deaths of over 500 people. So that's the real-life historical incident in which this novel unfolds. The entire novel is centered around the death of a young boy called Dong-ho in the Gwangju Uprising, and the style in which this book is written is really interesting because each chapter is told from the perspective of a different person whose life was somehow affected by the death of Dong-ho. We get perspectives, I think, from his best friend, his mom, then also from like a factory worker, a prisoner, a guy who runs a publication. From what I'm given to understand, it's the story of how all of these different people become interconnected due to one single act, the death of the young boy Dong-ho. So this is not going to be a light read. Although it seems like kind of dark subject material, I'm very, very excited to read this novel because the author, Kang, won the Man Booker Prize for her previous novel, The Vegetarian, and this novel has also received a lot of praise. The fourth challenge is to read a book recommended by an Asian. So that could be a book recommended by me, by any other Asian booktuber, by any one of your Asian friends or family members. Y'all get the gist. For that, I chose the book The Reluctant Fundamentalist by Pakistani author Mohsin Hamid. This book has been heavily recommended to me by lots of South Asian people I know. It's also been recommended by one of my favorite actors, Riz Ahmed, because he starred in the movie adaptation of this, which I have not yet watched. And I actually bought this book like 5 years ago on the recommendation of a South Asian friend. So I'm finally getting around to reading it. The book came out in 2007 and it's written in this really, really interesting format. The entire novel is framed as taking place over the span of one evening, when the protagonist, Chungaze, approaches an American stranger at a cafe in Pakistan, sits down next to him, and engages in a conversation about his life. And then he tells the story of how he eventually became disillusioned with America. The entire novel is written in, I believe, the second perspective. It's as if Chungaze is having the conversation with you. And I believe this book was the finalist for a bunch of different awards, including the Man Booker. So I'm excited to see if it lives up to the hype. The fifth and final challenge in the Asian Readathon is an optional one, and it's one that I unfortunately won't be able to engage in. And that is to specifically read the novel Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. My library does have one electronic copy of Little Fires Everywhere, but it is so in demand and so on hold that it won't be available for another 4 months. So I'm going to be sitting this challenge out. I do, however, want to shout out 2 more books by Asian authors that I will be reading, or more specifically listening to, during the month of May. Using my public library's app, I've checked out 2 audiobooks that I can listen to while I cook, do the dishes, clean around the house, etc. I figured I'd just throw them out there to loop y'all in. The first audiobook is a very light and enjoyable read. It's Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by the Singaporean author Balli Kaur Jaswal. This book was actually recommended to me by my friend Ami, who lives in Singapore. It's about a young Indian woman who lives in the UK. She drops out of law school against her parents' wishes, and she instead starts teaching this creative writing class at a Sikh community center. And her students are basically all of these Punjabi widows. Considering the title, I think you guys can all guess what happens next. I basically threw this in to sort of make sure I was reading light, fun things as well during these trying times, and quite frankly, because my friend recommended it, and I trust her. The second audiobook is Severance by Chinese-American author Ling Ma. This book came out in 2018, and it's apparently satire and sci-fi. It's set in the 2010s, and a pandemic called the Shen fever just like decimates the world. Shen fever causes people to repeatedly do an action until their bodies basically fall apart. But some people, for some unknown reason, happen to be immune to it. And one of those people is the protagonist of the story, Candace, who's originally Chinese but moved to New York 5 years ago. So it's apparently like a post-apocalyptic zombie satire about immigration, about capitalism, about survival and humanity and all of that jazz. Severance has been on my list of books to read for at least 6 months now, and given that there are sort of loose parallels with what we're going through, and the fact that Cindy, who created this challenge, actually recommended the novel in her introduction book, I'm very hyped to listen to the audiobook. So that's what I'm planning on reading during the month of May. If you're planning on reading along with me, or if you have more recommendations of cool Asian authors, let me know down in the comments below. I want to hear you guys' thoughts. I want to hear what you guys have been reading or planning to read this upcoming month, whether you're participating in the Asian Readathon or not. So that's everything from me, folks. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great upcoming week. And even if the rest of your week ends up becoming messy or imperfect, I hope that you're still able to create and experience some truly beautiful moments. Thanks for watching. Bye.